Okay, we've been talking about the chronological span of the reign of Edward the Confessor, looking at the important people, the important turning points, the story of his reign. But we also need to really closely consider what lies beneath all of this. And if we're going to make any judgment on how effective a king Edward the Confessor was, then we need to look at how well the country is run. So I'm going to be talking about justice, finance, and administration in particular during Edward's reign. If we're going to make a fair judgment of Edward, we need to consider these points carefully. I'll begin by talking about justice. Now, Edward is famous. He's famous for the justice during his reign. The Normans continually talk about this. Henry I in his coronation charter, of course, says he promises a return to the time of the laws of King Edward. And this shows that this reputation that Edward had. Bear in mind, of course, the Normans are legitimising their conquest by stressing continuity with the reign of Edward, but this is certainly noteworthy that Edward the Confessor's reign is seen as a period of great justice. Could talk at great length about this, so I'm not going to, but basically Anglo-Saxon justice at this time, we're talking about the tithing system. These are 10 or 12 men who share collective responsibility. This is freemen. If one of them commits a crime, then all part of the tithing is responsible for this crime. So then it's up to them to self-police, if you will. And this is fairly effective. In a world where there is no police force, but in a world where catching criminals is almost impossible. If there's no eyewitness, how can you possibly do this? So the tithing system is fairly effective. In terms of trials, of course, we have the famous trial by ordeal. This is the Saxon method of determining guilt, where you have trial by hot iron, where you're going to hold a boiling hot iron. The bandages are wrapped around the wound. This is given a couple of weeks. If they are healed, then God has suggested you are innocent. If they haven't healed, you are guilty. We also have the similar trial by hot water, where you plunge your hand into boiling water. There's lots to do with really burning yourself, and then it's a strange system to us, certainly, but I think it's important to think about this as much as of a deterrent as anything else. You're not going to risk it. You're not going to risk the accusation when the potential trial, let alone the punishment, the trial itself, is so, what we would think, barbarous, certainly. Then we have the 100, the Shire, and the King's Court. So you have the 100 courts here in the least serious cases, moving up to the Shire courts, which would meet less regularly than the 100 courts, and they're going to hear some of the more serious. And it goes right up to the King's Court, and this is separate this time, where the King's Court, where they are going to hear accusations of murder, treason, arson. The most serious cases will be judged at the King's Court. Of course, at this time, when we're thinking about what's going to follow during the Norman period, bear in mind we are talking very much about customary law here, not common law. This is Anglo-Saxon customary law. But this is a sophisticated system, and like I say, Edward is remembered as a pillar of justice in later periods. Next thing I'm going to talk about is finance under Edward. Coins are minted regularly. The coinage is of a very good quality. It's far superior to what's going on in the continent at the time. England is a very well-run country. There's no getting around this. The fact that Edward is able to mint these coins regularly suggests a country that is stable. It's as simple as that, isn't it? I mean, if you're able to create these coins and pass them out amongst the shires, amongst the earldoms, this is a country that is under tight control. In terms of tax, of course, the major tax is the geld. This is the land tax. This is collected very regularly. Again, this is demonstrative of a well-run country, and it's clear that Edward is an incredibly wealthy man. The other probably most famous tax is the Danegeld. This is the specific tax that is specifically raised to pay off the Danes, to pay off the Vikings, to prevent their incursions. And this has also been running fairly successfully. And then there's also the Haregeld, which is again it's the man's tax, the lord's tax. And this is to pay for mercenaries, to pay for soldiers to come to fight. Interestingly, it appears likely that Edward abolishes this. And this is suggestive of a king who is... And of course he also, let's not forget, he sells off the navy. And this is suggestive of a king who is not prioritising the military, which is how we might think about Edward. But what he's doing here is he's taking a great weight of tax off the population. Now I think of it, there is perhaps something of the Jeremy Corbyn about Edward the Confessor. They even look alike now, I consider it. But all of this suggests a country that is well run and is successful at this period. This is all underpinned by a very, very successful and sophisticated administration. Of course, you have the Witan at the top. This is the great council that is helping the king, advising him on all the great matters of state. And we have also under Edward, we have the chancery. The chancery is producing these writs and charters that are being sent out. The king's words are being sent out all over the country. The land is very, very clearly divided into the earldoms, the shires, the hundreds and hides. And so all of this time, I'm not going to talk about military now because I'll talk about military when we talk about the Battle of Hastings, but during this whole period, all of this, we can see that Edward is in control of this country. How effective a monarch is Edward the Confessor? You'd have been, I would suggest, a lot happier to be a peasant or a craftsperson working under Edward than you would have been under William, for example. So we need to bear this in mind. Against all of this negativity we tend to associate with Edward as a weak ruler, that actually when it comes to the nuts and bolts, the functioning of government, Edward is providing strong and stable leadership. Okay, thanks.